from one diamond sport to another, Nick, because you have a little bit of the same thing for Nebraska baseball and what softball did from the first weekend to the second weekend. But now for Nebraska, it's still a tough Louisiana team. Not ranked in the same way that you're going in and seeing Vanderbilt in your true road game with Grand Canyon at the end of 3 days. And you have a true series. It's not a one-off with a bunch of different teams. What have you seen, or what are your expectations for the Huskers and the Ragin' Cajuns this weekend, a Friday to Sunday series down in Louisiana?
Well, and as I mentioned in the first segment, the weather is going to be very Nebraska-like. Tomorrow night's first pitch, I mean, we're going to be upper 30s, low 40s for that one, and then I think we don't get out of the 50s at all. So it's going to be a little bit more of that true spring-like weather for Nebraska, and I'm hoping Nebraska uses that to their advantage. They've practiced in this. They've been outside, but they've practiced in the cooler temperatures. So just the overall feel with the aluminum to the baseball, they should have a little bit more natural feel. Those are just little things, though. As far as the one thing that I was curious about the most, I expected Will Walsh most likely would get the ball on Sunday just because you did have Jackson go not only on Monday, so it'd been shorter rest for him, but he did leave the game with what appeared to me be a little bit of, I think as Will Bolt described it, a little bit of a twinge in the forearm area. Nothing that seemed to be too serious. I know the training staff didn't feel like there was anything to be overly concerned about, but something that'll be monitored. But Jackson was very effective before he came out. But Will Walsh, I mean, my goodness, he was absolutely dealing against San Diego State. So I think he's also earned that. And whoever is the odd man out, well, that's going to be your Tuesday guy. And, you know, we'll see who gets the Wednesday nod when you get into those double midweek games. But I like the way that the staff is set up this week. I think all three guys gave you some really positive moments, and really even the type of pressure that is going to be on Mason McConaughey to set the tone. I mean, he still had some really good stuff, some good swing and miss stuff. He was racking up the strikeout numbers. And what we learn now is UC Irvine, they're a pretty damn good offensive team. They clubbed it around this weekend. So that was, you're never going to accept defeat or anything, but people, as we're still trying to learn about some of these teams, UC Irvine is a good team. I thought Ty Horn did some good things. There was a little bit of rocky moments there early on, but I thought he settled in okay too. And as I mentioned, Will Walsh was fantastic, Jackson Brockett. So your rotation, I thought, gave you a lot more positives than negatives. So that's where I start with this weekend. If you can lock that back down, if Mason is not only getting the strikeouts that he got against UC Irvine, but the contact that he's inducing is a little bit more weak than what you saw from UC Irvine, because I thought even some of their hits that they got, that was a little bit more weak contact. So are those able to induce into ground balls, and your defense is making plays behind you? For Ty Horn, I just want to see Ty be consistent. And I think he's got a great opportunity to do so. And then I expect Will Walsh to pound the zone, to have the command. I'm really excited to see start number 2 for him, because this has been that now full transition into Will Walsh. You're just a pitcher. We're going to build you like one. Let's see how that looks. Bullpen wise, this is the one guy that I expect the world out of him. And I know he expects the world out of himself. And I expect a huge bounce back whenever his number is called this weekend. And that's Jalen Worthley. Yeah, he was with the changeup. He was missing a little bit. I just don't think he had a great feel for his off-speed pitches in that outing against Vanderbilt. He still was fine. He still got some outs, but you could tell he was having to compete through what felt like he just didn't have good stuff. He didn't have his best stuff. So there's the other part about Jalen Worthley that you love. He's a competitor. And so he competed his way through that. I want to see his stuff come through that. And also you saw now 2 appearances out of Christo. And I think Drew, again, more positive than good things. We saw what he did in that huge moment to not only get the strikeout, but then the subsequent ground out to get out of that inning to keep Nebraska and GCU tied. Yeah. So a lot of good stuff there. But more than anything, watch the at-bats this weekend. Wouldn't be shocked if Nebraska is aggressive a lot more early in the count, because I think especially in that game on Friday and then the way that they ended that series against Grand Canyon, I think the guys would tell you they felt maybe they were letting some pitches early in the count go by, and then they were getting themselves into 2-strike situations with, give them credit, they were able to hit behind runners and do some stuff with 2 strikes. But I think this is a team, given what they want to do offensively, wouldn't be shocked if you see some guys being a little bit more aggressive early in the counts.
Yeah, I want to talk about the hitting, but I have to ask you about that bullpen and one guy in particular. And do we have any updates on Tucker Timmerman and who left that Vanderbilt game? The pictures got shared all over social media because what a trooper, and getting into the post game picture and all of those things. And then the guy's holding up his jersey after the win on Sunday, and we know that the reason he wasn't there Sunday and Monday is because he went back to Omaha to get evaluated on all of those things. Do we know anything on his status right now? And then obviously not particularly what that means for him coming out of the bullpen, but overall health-wise, because it did not look good on half of his face.
Yeah, and we know that from what I was told about their particular injury, it's very similar to what you see hockey players go through as well, as you can imagine, which isn't great. But I know that there's a procedure that will be done, but the swelling still has to subside. Right now, the timetable looks like it could be in the ballpark of 6 to 8 weeks.
Okay.
But from what I was also told is after the procedure takes place, that's all dependent on the individual, where, again, using the hockey example from what I was told is some guys come back after the procedure 2 weeks after that procedure, and others, it might take several more weeks. So it's all going to be up to Tucker on how he does respond. And I know Will was talking about this yesterday a little bit too about, he can still do things to keep his arm conditioned, and he will do that. We saw him in the elevator after the game, and I mean, the kid had to be going on pure adrenaline, but I mean, he was talking like nothing was wrong other than that side of his face where he had a huge old ice pack, and he had a very, very dark, that one point was white, a very dark red thing coming out of his nose, some cloth coming out of his nose. But, he was still talking, and you could tell he was excited that Nebraska got that victory over Vanderbilt. He's in good spirits. They flew him out the next day to get him back and to start the recovery. But he's a guy that Nebraska, obviously in the bullpen, was going to rely on heavily. So that is definitely a hit to the bullpen, but man, it could have been a lot worse. You think about 106. I mean, as Will said yesterday, the damage to his face was as if the ball did not hit the ground, but it was a straight line drive to his face. Thank goodness that thing hit the ground, because if that thing did not hit the ground, this could be a much more serious conversation as far as what he could be dealing with. So you hate to see him out for the extended period of time. They're very confident he will be back this season. But you're also very grateful that it wasn't worse than it is.
And you've got some chances now to give early season opportunities for some other guys, spread some innings around out of that bullpen in a way that you wouldn't have before. Gabe Swanson, as we all saw against Vanderbilt, all 6 of the RBIs, and raked and was getting national attention for the way he played. Rightfully so, because it's Vanderbilt and they're a top 20 team and all of those things. But there were moments over, not Sunday, because Sunday just kind of poured it on, but there were moments where the bats went a little bit quiet, Nick. And is that a little bit of what you're hearing from Will Bolton, wanting to get the aggressiveness at the plate ratcheted up earlier in the count than letting face it? There's a lot of times that you see the strategy of you're going to take a pitch and you're going to run up the pitch count and you're going to see one first. Is there going to be some more first pitch aggressiveness this weekend?
I get the feeling there could be, and that's not having any direct conversation with Will about this or anything like that. I just feel like when you look at the strikeout numbers from this weekend, and they were up there, and that's college baseball too. So I know a lot of people want to hit the panic button there, but if you look around college baseball, your most elite teams, if they're not getting on base, a lot of them are being retired via the strikeout. So it's not time to panic necessarily, but the one thing you'll hear Will Bolt talk about a lot is the competitive at-bats. And I want to give you an example, a good example of that, where Max Butenbach, who, other than the home run, he had kind of a tough weekend. But if you look at the amount of pitches he saw and the amount of just battles that he was in and racking up the pitch count and just the pitches alone that he saw in his at-bats, that's a competitive at-bat, even one that doesn't result to him being on base. So there's the good side of that. But then, the bad side of it is, the the strikeouts, not necessarily the amount of strikeouts, are the ones where you go down looking. And if in a 1-2 count, as opposed to maybe a full count where you just got bested. So those things about the competitive at bats, to me, I always feel like the remedy is if you're seeing and these guys are being scouted, and now you've got a full weekend on Louisiana Lafayette to know what their pitchers' tendencies are, that if they're emphasizing that early count leverage and getting pitch 1 and pitch 2 over the plate for a strike, this is a group that I think will take that concept of, might look at the first one, but boy, if that first one's drivable, I'm going after it, because we need to ignite our offense that way. So I expect, especially maybe a guy like Gabe Swanson, who in that game against Vanderbilt was fantastic, but he also had some tough at-bats. And so I think there are a couple of guys in this lineup that you would think, okay, they're not going to waste any time. They're going to go after it, because you also go back to the amount of college pitching that some of these players have seen in this lineup, that I think they feel they're going to get an early read on a guy a lot quicker than maybe some of your more inexperienced guys that'll be in the lineup.
In the last inning that Nebraska was at the plate, 3 strikeouts, including 1 backwards K in that to end the game against Grand Canyon. This weekend, Friday, 6 o'clock, that one will be on ESPN Plus. Saturday and Sunday, not being streamed there, but you can get all 3 games on the Huskers Radio Network with, of course, Nick, Ben, and the whole gang. Looking forward to listening to all of those for you guys. Let me ask this for you. I'll do this one. Where are you guys going to eat first?
So once we get done with this, I'm going to try to map out, because the team's actually going to be practicing when we get into town tonight. So I'm looking for just a casual, under the radar, but amazing Cajun food place. Like, I don't want the touristy place. I want the one that the locals are like, yeah, we go here because all the tourists go there. This is the place. So I've got a few connections in and around the Lafayette area that I think are going to give me some good recommendations. But I will tell you this: I love Cajun food, but I am bringing one of the small little travel bottles of Tums, because
that's
you don't want to mess around, Caleb. You don't want to take any chances. You never know. Because I know how I like Cajun food here, but that's Cajun food in Nebraska.
You know what some of that is also, as I realized between you, me, and Ben the other day in the conversation, and all of us in our stories talking about our 4-year-old, and I was like, oh God, we're all right in that same spot. We have aged into buying Tums on a regular basis. I've realized. I
do not travel without it, because there was a time that I had the stomach of a goat. I could eat anything at any time, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., did not matter, and I felt fine. Now it's like it's like clockwork. If I eat anything after 9 o'clock, that is not necessarily healthy or anything, a little bit of the heartburn there. So I got to take care of that, making sure I'm covering all my bases for this trip. But yeah, I know Jared Meister and I were talking about this too, the SID for Nebraska. And I was asking him which trip he was looking forward to the most. He said this one because of the food. Right. And it's hard to disagree. There's going to be some good fare, because it ain't going to be the weather this weekend, that's for sure.
No, not like what you guys were treated to this past weekend.
Man, that was beautiful.
Check out Nick and the whole gang, Huskers Radio Network, for all of the ranked Nebraska still, number 23 in the nation, against the Louisiana Ragin' Cajuns down there in Lafayette all week.